Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. What's good? You know the vibes. Jon Jeune here at the real Jon Jeune _FF, and I'm back with another live episode of the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. It is week 8, and we're officially at the halfway can't speak. It's week 8, and we're officially past the halfway point of the fantasy regular season. And this is where every lineup decision matters. We've got a bunch of teams on bye this week: Arizona, Detroit, Jacksonville, Las Vegas, the Rams, and Seattle. So you might be digging a little bit deeper into those benches for some startable options. So today we're breaking down every matchup on the slate. Going to be looking at players that you should be starting, maybe sitting or fading heading into the weekend. And as always, I'll be dropping my starts of the week at the end of the show, so make sure you stick around for that. Before we get into it, don't forget to check out patreon.com/FFDX. That's the official FFDX Fantasy Football Diagnostics Patreon page. You can join for free to access the FFDX cheat sheet or become an FFDX supporter for just $1 a month to get access to the weekly waiver wire article, expanded rankings, and our Sunday morning Q&A, all designed to help you dominate your leagues. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. Week 8 matchups. Let's go. So, as you always, if you've been listening, you've been watching, following along all season, we cover the top 10 quarterbacks, top 10 tight ends, top 20 wide receivers, and top 20 running backs. And what I mean by that is players that are outside those thresholds according to fantasy expert consensus rankings. We cover as guys that you should be playing, guys you should be looking to help you provide an edge in your matchup this week, whether you're dealing with injuries, whether you're dealing with the bye weeks, whatever it may be, or you're just scrounging the waiver wire because maybe you didn't draft so well, right? So, and then also we look at guys inside those thresholds as guys that we maybe should take a look at as questionable plays, fades, sits, things like that. So, got to recap last week. So, last week I think it was a solid week. I mean, given how crazy last week was, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but across my leagues, it seemed like there were some teams that just did not score like many points at all. And then there were teams that absolutely went off. Hopefully you were on the right side of that. I definitely was in several of my leagues, and some, not to say that I didn't take any L's, because I definitely took some L's, but across the board for the most part, had some pretty high scores, and it was thanks to some of these guys right here. So we gave out 16 picks last week. Of the 16 picks, 5 of those guys beat their ECR by 10 spots or more. We had another 5 of those 16 guys beat their ECR outright. We had one miss in terms of a guy that just failed to meet their ECR, and then we had 5 big misses. So like I said, given how weird the week was, I think it was a pretty good week overall. We had guys like Matthew Stafford, Isaiah Pacheco, Ramondre Stevenson, Jordan Addison, and don't forget Oronde Gadsden II, all beat their ECR by more than 10 spots or more. Stafford and Gadsden really came in as some big time hits there, as they each Stafford finished as the QB4 after being ranked 14, and Gadsden finished as the tight end 2 after being ranked as the tight end 22. And then Addison, I think that was a pretty solid hit too. I mean, he finishes the wide receiver 12, a number 1 wide receiver, after being ranked as the wide receiver 30. So again, all 3 came in as more than solid plays. And then you look at the hits that we had. Michael Penix, despite being on the road, despite how it looked, still finished as a quarterback 17 despite being ranked 21. Now, again, I don't know how many people that helped in 1 quarterback leagues, but if you're playing in a 2 quarterback league, that definitely helped you. CJ Stroud finished as the quarterback 15 after being ranked the quarterback 18. So, that game was a little weird. I honestly promised that I thought that there would have been more out of Stroud in that game. Jordan Mason finishes the running back 20 after being ranked as the running back 23. Wan'Dale Robinson continues to be a weekly hit, it feels like. The wide receiver 21 after being ranked as the wide receiver 26. Jerome Ford, I'm not going to count him. Finished the running back 50, ranked as a running back 51. That one I'm not really going to count because nobody played Jerome Ford. I didn't even want to talk about Jerome Ford. I didn't want to talk about anybody in that game outside of the player that ended up being my start of the week in Quinshon Judkins. But yeah, that was just a terrible game to play and a terrible game to choose players from outside of, like I mentioned, Judkins there. And then we had the one miss was Zach Ertz, was the tight end 12 after being ranked the finisher as tight end 14 after being ranked as a tight end 12. Did catch a touchdown early in that game. I do wonder like how it would have finished for him had Jaden Daniels been able to complete that game, because he does seem to have a better chemistry with Jaden Daniels than he does with Marcus Mariota. And then when we look at the big misses across the board, Justin Fields, I think that's self-explanatory there. Was benched at halftime. I think that was part of the risk. And I'll be honest, guys, like I undersold that risk. And so that's on me. I definitely felt it. It cost me a matchup in one of my leagues playing Justin Fields over Daniel Jones. I played too much into, the Chargers are a decent matchup, and, it'll be a run heavy game script potentially. And, I just thought that Justin Fields would be able to get it done with his legs, but it seems like he's absolutely cooked in terms of, the kid has all the talent in the world. I just think mentally right now he's fried. Like he's not seeing the field. He's holding on to the ball way too long. So, I think he's got to sort some things out. But I think this year, I mean, I have no plans, no desires to even touch Justin Fields for the rest of the season until, he's not even going to be starting this weekend. It'll be Tyrod Taylor. But even after that, if he does somehow get his job back, like I would need to see some significant improvement before I go back to that well again. The same can't be said for his teammate Mason Taylor, who also struggled last week, I think, with the matchup there. Or not with the matchup, but with Justin Fields struggling. And Tyrod did come in the second half and give him some life, but I think by that point it was a little bit too late. Luther Burden, basically unplayable last week. Again, DJ Moore ended up practicing and playing, and so I think that definitely had some impact there on Luther Burden's ability to make an impact. But I think also the game script, the Bears went to a very run-heavy game script. Matthew Golden, you would have loved to see more in a game that the Packers were down in and trying to come back. Sterling Shepard, I think, I would love to say that, hey, Ibuka wasn't expected to play, so that took away some opportunities from Sterling Shepard. But honestly, at the end of the day, I think Sterling Shepard, I said 7 for 51. I think we would have killed for a 7 for 51 from Sterling Shepard. Instead, we got the wide receiver 51. And those are the big misses there. So, like I said, I think overall a solid week, but we'll, strive to do better, strive to be better. So, let's continue to keep this ship rolling here. And like I said, it is the matchup show. So, let's get it going. Starting with the first matchup of the week, let's talk about the New York Jets are going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. And let's talk tight end. Cincinnati tight end, that is. Noah Fant, he's the ECR PPR tight end 23 this week. He played a season high in snaps and ran a season high in routes last week, catching 4 targets for 44 yards and a score in his first game without his teammate Mike Gesicki. Now he gets a New York Jets defense that's allowing the 7th most PPR points to opposing tight ends over their last 3 games. Now, in this game, I think, some are also left to wonder, what do you do with Mason Taylor? Now, Mason Taylor is ranked, according to expert consensus rankings, he actually is ranked inside that. He's ranked inside the top 10 of tight ends, right? He's the tight end 9 on the week according to experts consensus rankings. Now, am I gonna I think the thing is that he was dealing with a quad, didn't practice yesterday, but I definitely love this spot for Mason Taylor as well. The Cincinnati Bengals allowed the most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Chase Brown, good to see him get some love as well too. Showed out pretty well last week in an offense led by Joe Flacco, and I think he'll continue to do that as well. But outside of that, I mean, I'm not overly excited for anyone else in this game. Breece Hall has yet to score a touchdown on the season. Maybe with Tyrod Taylor in at quarterback, it'll lift the tides there a little bit, and you can see Breece Hall make an impact. But Noah Fant is the guy I'm throwing my hat in the ring for this week as a someone who's underrated compared to their expert consensus rankings. All right, now let's move on to Atlanta hosting the Miami Dolphins, and let's talk Atlanta running back Tyler Algier. He's the ECR PPR running back 28. Talked about Algier earlier in the waiver show, but if you're hurting for a running back or a flex this week with all the injuries, Algier makes a ton of sense here. Expect against the Miami defense, allowing the second most PPR points to opposing tight ends or opposing running backs, that is, over their last 3 games. We obviously expect Bijan to have a good game in this matchup, especially. But if the Atlanta Falcons get a huge lead, and it could be a heavy dose of Algier in the second half. Now, staying with those same Atlanta Falcons, let's talk about Atlanta Falcons quarterback Michael Penix. He's the ECR PPR quarterback 15. All right, so mid-show last week, if you guys were watching or listening, I talked myself out of Penix being a viable play, right? Citing his home road splits, and he didn't do anything to dispel that theory last week against San Francisco. But now he's at home, heavily favored, facing a Miami defense that allows the most EPA per pass attempt on the season. So it's like, if you look at the fantasy numbers, right? Miami over the last 3 games is 30th in terms of fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks. So you would sit there and if you are on the matchup, if you are looking at the cheat sheet every week, which we have the matchup table there, that has fantasy points allowed the last 3 weeks and how each defense ranks, you'd sit there, you look at Miami, you'd be like, oh, I don't want to start a quarterback against Miami. But then you also, you kind of got to dig a little bit deeper, understand, hey, the last two quarterbacks they played, Dylan Gabriel, Bryce Young, right? They didn't have to do a whole lot through the air, right? Miami's defense is kind of like a run funnel here. So in terms of that, it kind of masks how bad they are against opposing quarterbacks. But if you look at some other metrics, like I just said, EPA per pass attempt, they allow the most expected points allowed per play there, per pass play. So anyway, KJ coming in with a question. KJ, would you drop Travion Henderson for Algier? Oof. Look, so I said it last week. I would not blame anybody that drops Travion Henderson. Absolutely not. I would not blame anybody. Am I going to do it? No, because I believe in the talent. I think he's a good player. I think at some point it'll turn around. And I know my league mates, some of them feel the same way. So as soon as I drop him, he'll be gone, right? Now, could be a good thing if my league mates pick him up. I don't know. But like I said, I believe in the talent, so I'm going to continue to hold, right? Now, if you are playing in I don't know how many people are in your league, KJ. I don't know how many people are like out Travion Henderson, believers in the talent like that. But I will tell you this: if you need a win, right? And you need a flex play, like Algier 100% makes sense. I mean, again, I don't know if you're asking for just this week or if you're asking for just overall in general. Um, but I will tell you this: I'm starting Algier. It's probably not a hot take. I'm starting Algier over Travion Henderson. I mean, Travion Henderson's basically unstartable. And at this point, who has more upside, right? Tyler Algier probably has more upside than Travion Henderson. So yeah, I think on the surface that makes a ton of sense, right? Because Algier actually has some semblance of standalone value, right? Like you can at least predict, hey, you know what? Atlanta's going to be leading. This seems like a good possible game script to play Algier, right? We've seen Algier have good games and score touchdowns, even when games were competitive. And if Bijan gets injured, there's a possibility, or not a possibility, Algier would take on that lead role. If Ramondre gets injured, right? Like, is it going to be Terrell Jennings? That's a question you have to ask yourself, right? So, um, again, that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, I would probably do it. But again, depends on how you again, it's your team. It depends on how you truly feel about Travion Henderson. It says 12-team league. My other running backs are Chase Brown and Bill. Oof. Yeah, sounds like you need some depth there, my brother. Yeah, for sure. Um, if those are your only two running backs and Travion Henderson is the third running back, I mean, I feel like you need somebody who can actually help you out there. Again, I hope you're not holding any backup kickers or backup defenses, or maybe you don't have. Hopefully, you don't have, you know, uh, a really strong quarterback and then holding a backup quarterback, or a really strong tight end and you're holding a backup tight end. So those are the things I would take a look at as well. Because just me, I tend to value like holding running backs. I mean, there's a joke in my work league that I have all the running backs. I really don't. I wish I did have all the running backs, but I tend to hound running backs just because of how valuable and how scarce they are across fantasy leagues. But appreciate the question, KJ. Let's move on to the next game here. We got the New York Giants on their way to face the Philadelphia Eagles, and we've got another guy that's just a staple on this list. New York Giants wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 21. Like, now look, I don't know how. I might have to start implementing a Wan'Dale Robinson rule pretty soon, man, because he hasn't finished worse than the wide receiver 21 in the last 2 weeks. I don't know why my note says 20, but he hasn't finished worse than the wide receiver 21 in the last 2 weeks. Was the wide receiver 5 the last time he faced the same Eagles defense 2 weeks ago. And that's over their last 3 games. They've allowed the 11th most PPR points to the wide receiver position. I'm just not sure how you could go away from Wan'Dale Robinson right now. Over the last 2 weeks, he's 5th amongst all wide receivers in the NFL in target share at 32%. So I think he'll continue to have a role here in this offense. I think he'll continue to be utilized, and I'm looking forward to seeing him continue to make an impact on fantasy rosters, especially in a week like this where we got a gazillion teams on bye. Right. All right. Let's move on to the next matchup here. We've got the San Francisco 49ers. Oh, I think let's go back to that matchup though, actually. I think people want to know, like, is Jackson Dart legit, right? Is this real? Can you just keep playing him? And here's what I'll tell you guys, right? Like, I personally, I've been on the Jackson Dart train since his first start against the Chargers. Well, after that, even before the first start, I said, hey, maybe we pick him up because of the legs, whatever. But even after the first start, I was like, all right, guys, I think we got to play him, right? Just based off the legs, based off, the fact that he had run for 50 plus rushing yards in 3 straight games. That streak broke last week, but now he scored a touchdown. I think just off the legs alone, he's got to be considered in our lineups. He's the expert consensus quarterback 12. So, I think the industry is starting to rank him as such. But I would continue to play him until, somebody, or until he basically proves us wrong, right? All right, let's move on to the next game here. Let's talk the New York Giants, or not the New York Giants. Let's talk the San Francisco 49ers against the Houston Texans. And let's talk Houston Texans tight end Dalton Schultz. He's the ECR PPR tight end 12. Now, if Nico Collins is forced to miss this week with a concussion, which is seeming more and more likely, then Schultz would immediately slot in as one of the top targets for CJ Stroud, giving Cade Otton a run for his money as Mr. Necessary here. Last week, Schultz caught 9 of 10 targets for 98 receiving yards. And while San Francisco has been pretty good against opposing tight ends, I think Schultz will have to be involved here. Staying with the Houston Texans pass catchers, let's move on to Houston Texans rookie wide receiver, Jalen Noel, ECR PPR wide receiver 54. Now, Noel is an intriguing prospect, was compared to Tank Dell for his stature, playing style, but Noel was pretty productive last week in limited opportunities, catching 4 of 7 targets for 77 receiving yards, despite playing only 45% of the snaps and running only 48% of the routes. Now, he could be rewarded for his performance, especially as Collins, again, is expected to miss, as well as Texans starting slot wide receiver Christian Kirk, which is the role that Noel would most likely be filling here. Now, I think he could be a wide receiver 3 in a plus matchup against a San Francisco defense, allowing the 10th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games. All right, y'all. Let's move on to this next matchup. We've got the Chicago Bears taking on the Baltimore Ravens. And let's talk Chicago Bears wide receiver, DJ Moore. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 28. Now, it's been a disappointing season for DJ Moore, right? But, last week he saw a season high in snaps and target share in a week where we thought he might not even be playing, right? So, or he might be limited due to that groin injury. And so now he's set to face off against a Baltimore defense, allowing the 8th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games in a game environment that has the highest total on the week, right? So this is a nice spot here for him, right? Nice spot for the Bears offense as a whole. Caleb Williams flopped as my quarterback start of the week this week, but naturally he'll bounce back this week the same way Matthew Stafford did. So, and when you look at this matchup here, it's a really good one, and you've got the Baltimore Ravens getting a healthy Lamar Jackson on the other side of it. So I think the arrow is pointing up here for DJ Moore. So in a week, again, I'm going to say it often today, but in a week, but you got 6 teams on bye. Teams are looking for flex plays, wide receiver plays, running back plays. DJ Moore makes some sense here as a guy to get in your lineup. All right, let's move on to the next matchup here. We've got the Buffalo Bills against the Carolina Panthers. This game is sneaky, man. This game is really sneaky. I mean, the Carolina Panthers are 7.5-point dogs at home. The Bills coming off back-to-back losses. This game has a 47.5-point total. Buffalo's defense, Sean McDermott, defensive-minded head coach, that defense has been strong for many, many years, it feels like, under Sean McDermott. This year, they're not a bad defense, but they're just not a good defense. I'm saying this subjectively as I can, but I've been rostering Buffalo's defense for weeks, and going to this matchup, I don't really want to play Buffalo's defense, because it almost seems like every week that I've played them, even though they've been huge favorites, it's kind of been underwhelming. So I look at this matchup here. You got a Buffalo defense that, allowing the 3rd most. Where is it actually? They allow the third most PPR points over the last 3 weeks over their last 3 games to opposing running backs. So like when you look at that, can Carolina, like Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard, get off a little bit on this Buffalo defense? I think so. You got and it's not like you're going to a quarterback who just can't play, right? Andy Dalton is a veteran. He gets the ball out quick. He's going to find his playmakers. Him and Xavier Legette seem to have a thing going. I think he's going to get Ted Roy McMillan involved as well. This game's a little sneaky. But let's talk Buffalo wide receiver Khalil Shakir. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 27 heading into this matchup here. And the Panthers on paper look like a middle-of-the-road matchup for opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games. However, Shakir is in a better spot than I think the matchup might indicate. The Panthers are tied for the 12th most EPA, expected points added, allowed per pass attempt to opposing offenses. And when you look at targets that are directed to wide receivers in a wide alignment, right? So guys that are lined up out wide, facing, their outside corners like J.C. Horn, they rank 24th in expected points added per pass attempt. So you're like, oh, okay, that's pretty good, right? You're in the top third. You're a top third defense in that metric, essentially. But when you look at wide receivers that are in a slot alignment, they allow the 10th most EPA per pass attempt to opposing offenses, right? And no Bills player has run more routes from that alignment than Khalil Shakir. So I think it's a pretty good spot for Shakir here. Joshua Palmer, a little banged up. Keon Coleman up and down, probably not the game for him, just, given what I had just said, right? I actually like Dalton Kincaid quite a bit, and, we'll talk about that one a little bit later. But I think Khalil Shakir here is in a very good spot when you look a little bit deeper into the matchup. All right, let's move on to the next game here. We got the Cleveland Browns against the New England Patriots. This game is not that exciting from a fantasy perspective, right? It's really not. Like, you've got 2 pretty solid defenses here. And I'm not excited to play anybody except maybe New England tight end Hunter Henry. Right? He's got a great matchup here. Cleveland has allowed the 6th most PPR points to opposing tight ends over their last 3 games. And this lines up nice for Henry, who is in need of a pick-me-up game. Right? He hasn't finished inside the top 24 of tight ends since week 4 against Carolina when he was the tight end 10. But he's coming off a game where he saw a season high not a season high, but he saw a 20.8% target share, which was his highest since week 3 when he finished as the tight end 1. So hopefully those opportunities continue in a plus matchup here for Hunter Henry. So yeah, he's the only guy I'm really excited to play this offense here, or in this game, I'll say. Ramondre Stevenson had a big game last week. I mean, look, if you were in the cheat sheet, if you subscribe to the Patreon, you're in the cheat sheet. Ramondre Stevenson was a sell for me this week. Again, you got to look at those matchups that he's actually performed well in. Those were all plus matchups. Outside of that, he has not been very effective. And this matchup is absolutely terrible against Cleveland. Where's Cleveland ranked? Cleveland, the 24th most PPR points to opposing running backs. So that number seems like it's trending up a little bit, but not excited to play Ramondre Stevenson ahead of this matchup. So, Trayvon Henderson, we just talked about that. Not playing him. He's an ECR PPR running back 38. Where does that compare to Tyler Algier? Because I wanted to make a note. Oh, Algier is a running back 28. Okay, so the industry agrees. As an echo chamber, we are playing Algier over Trayvon Henderson. I think that's an easy decision. At least it was an easy decision for me. But Yeah, they're not excited for this game one bit. All right, let's move on to the next game. We've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on their way to New Orleans to face the New Orleans Saints. There's been a little back and forth in the media about which team is dirty and whatnot. Whatever. I'm here for the football, and all that stuff makes the football a little bit more interesting and a little bit more edgy. All right, let's move on to the players in this game. I don't want to play Tampa Bay tight end K. Dot. Oh, by the way, y'all, is this the first tight end I talked about? It's not the first tight end I talked about. It's the third tight end I talked about. National Tight End Day this week. So, for whatever reason, and I have a feeling it'll be like the lowest amount of touchdowns scored by tight ends on National Tight End Day, just because everyone is so aware of it right now. Everyone's going to be placing bets on tight ends to score and putting all these crazy parlays together. It's going to remind me of last year when I had a 9-leg tight end parlay, and I just needed Travis Kelce and I think it was Cole Kmet score a touchdown. And they were giving me a cow shot option because I think the ticket, it was like $3 to win like 10 grand or something. And they were trying to give me $800. And I was like, no, I want the 10 grand. But obviously that didn't hit. But anyway, I feel like it's going to be the lowest scoring national tight end day in NFL history for some reason. Just have an inkling. Anyway, Tampa Bay tight end K. Dot and ECR PPR tight end 15, Cardio Cade, has evolved. He's evolving into Mr. Necessary. With Mike Evans now out for the year, there should be even more opportunities for Ott moving forward. Or maybe not more opportunities, but those same opportunities he's been seeing the last few weeks should continue, right? No Chris Godwin this week. He's already been ruled out. So this matchup this weekend is better than it looks on paper as well, too. The Saints are middle of the road over the last 3 weeks against opposing tight ends. Yet on the season, the Saints allow the 9th most expected points added per pass attempt to opponents in a tight alignment, aka a tight end. So, again, matchup looks middle of the road on paper, but when you look a little bit deeper, it looks a little bit better here for Cardio Cade, or as we're going to call him for the next few weeks at least, Mr. Necessary. And giving Mr. Necessary a run for his money, the Tasmanian Devil himself, Tampa Bay wide receiver Tez Johnson, ECR PPR wide receiver 36 by expert consensus rankings. Tez Johnson has made the most of his opportunities. I'm going to call him the Tasmanian Devil probably forever now. The most of his opportunities the last 2 weeks. The injuries in Tampa Bay have forced him into a larger role, and he's only a rookie, so it seems like he's getting better as we move forward here, right? Like he's been the wide receiver 26 and the wide receiver 17 the last 2 weeks respectively, and I think that should continue. He should continue to see more involvement with earned trust from quarterback Baker Mayfield in a decent matchup, 20th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games. I also like the Saints side quite a bit, but so does the industry. Chris Olave, it's crazy, man. We used to talk about Chris Olave every week here, and some weeks were better than others, but we were following the volume, right? So Chris Olave, shout out to him. It's great to see him come through. He ranked as a wide receiver 9 on the week. Rashid Shaheed, I think, is a viable play as well, ranked as a wide receiver 29 on the week. In a pinch, I'd play Spencer Rattler. Like, I'm really sitting here this week. I got a 2-quarterback league. I'm stuck between CJ Stroud, Spencer Rattler. I'm going between the two, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And this is part of the game theory that we often subscribe to. I got a pretty nice lead there from Arondé Gadsden the second. It's making me think, maybe I need the safer option here. CJ Stroud seems like the safer option. Spencer Rattler, though, great matchup at home. Yeah, I'm going back and forth on it, though. We'll see. I'll update you guys, let you guys know what I went with, especially if it costs me a matchup, because I will be in a lot of pain if that happens. All right. We got a question from Alex. Good morning, Alex. I need 2 flex players for my PPR league. Who would you play? Options are Dowdle, Diggs, Wandale, or Krosky Merritt. Oof. All right, let's see what we got here. Just off rip, right? I like Dowdle to be in there, and I like Wandale to be in there. Just off rip before I even look at anything. Now, we talked about Dowdle's matchup as well, right? Going up against Buffalo, third most PPR points allowed to opposing running backs over their last 3 games. Even though they're playing with Andy Dalton, the backup running back or backup quarterback there, he's a serviceable quarterback, a veteran quarterback. They're going to be able to operate their offense without any hiccups there. So I like Dowdle quite a bit. If they're going to have any chance of beating Buffalo, it's going to be because they ran the ball down Buffalo's throat. So Dowdle, even on limited touches, not limited touches, but split touches with Chuba last week, was still more effective than Chuba. So again, you could tell yourself 2 things to talk yourself into Dowdle here. There's what happens if he gets more touches? Feel pretty good about that. What happens if he scores a touchdown? You feel pretty good about that. If both happen, you feel damn good about that. So I like Dowdle. We talked about the matchup with Diggs going up against Cleveland. Not really in love with that matchup there. You'd be banking on some volume there for him, which this offense, they like to spread it around. They don't really have that one guy that they go to, constantly. So, and then the matchup is tough. You got Denzel Ward over there, in Cleveland. So, he'll have some matchups against him. So overall, I think it's a tougher day. And then when you look at Bill's in a halfway decent spot. Hasn't really, actually, no, 32nd most PPR points to opposing running backs the last 3 games for the Kansas City Chiefs. So not a great spot for Bill. Also, backup quarterback, which Marcus Mariota, yes, he's serviceable. That's fine. The issue I have there is that Mariota likes to run a lot, right? He likes to run himself. They're going to probably call some design quarterback runs as well. That takes some opportunities away from Bill. We also know Bill's not involved very much as a pass catcher. That's Jeremy McNichols' role. And then they're 9.5-point dogs. So there's a lot of question marks around Bill's role and his effectiveness, what it'll look like. And then I think when you look at Wandale, right, like we talked about Wandale, earlier, wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 21 each of the last 2 weeks. The last time he faced Philadelphia, he was the wide receiver 5. I have to go back and check. If I recall correctly, he did not even score a touchdown when he played against Philadelphia and still finish off as the wide receiver 5. So that was all based on volume, right? Receptions, yards. So I think those are my 2. Dowdle, Wandale, rock and roll, Alex. Good luck. All right, let's keep moving through the matchups here. Let's talk the Dallas Cowboys against the Denver Broncos. This game is absolutely bananas. Like, I don't know how to look at this game, because initially when I was going through the picks, I was thinking under for this game, or the total sits here at 48.5. I think Dallas does win this game as 3-point road dogs here, actually. But then I look at the Dallas side or the Denver side, and I like all of their options. Like, I like all their options here. So this will be an interesting game. But let's talk about Denver tight end. Evan Ingram, ECR PPR tight end 16. Now, Ingram came through again last week, 5 catches, 42 receiving yards, did have a season high 8 targets, and now he gets a Dallas defense allowing the 9th most PPR points to opposing tight ends over their last 3 games. Obviously, Bo Nix is in a great spot as well. Have him ranked pretty high at quarterback position, which I think a lot of people will this week. But this is a great spot here for that Denver pass offense. Cortland Sutton as well is in a fantastic spot. So I think Evan Ingram is going to be a primary beneficiary of, a lot of that production this week. Now, let's move on. Staying in this game, let's talk Denver wide receivers, Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims. Yes, we're two players at the same time. Troy Franklin, wide receiver 33, according to expert consensus rankings. Marvin Mims, wide receiver 39, according to expert consensus rankings. Now, like I said, I love this game, love this environment, potentially. Both, I think, are solid options to me this week as wide receiver 3 flex plays. In a game with a decently high total, again, given the bye weeks and also the plus matchup against the Dallas defense that has struggled all year, right? Now, I said this in the waiver show. Which one of these guys do I prefer? Give me Troy Franklin, running the most routes, running more routes on the field more, a little bit more predictable role here for Troy Franklin. Although Marvin Mims, the scheme touches, I do like scheme touches quite a bit. It's almost like guaranteed. It provides a high floor, right? A high floor when you get scheme touches. Just again, a little bit lower of a ceiling there, but with Marvin Mims, like he can catch a pass for 3 yards and turn it to 70 yards very quickly. So I think both guys are viable plays. They're at home this week, so favored 48.5 point total. I think both guys are great options. Now, let's move on to this next guy who I like quite a bit, man. I really like him quite a bit. We're talking about the Tennessee Titans versus the Indianapolis Colts. This guy was a guy I talked about on the waiver show. Pretty sure, was he featured on the cheat sheet? Yes, he was featured on the cheat sheet. He was the number 2 wide receiver on the cheat sheet this week, right? And I think if I could do it over, he'd probably be the number 1 guy. So he's a guy I'm loving to play this week across multiple leagues. I'll probably have him in quite a few DFS lineups as well. We're talking about Indianapolis wide receiver Alec Pierce. He's the expert consensus wide receiver 35, right? Now, last week, caught 5 of 10 targets for 98 receiving yards. All were season highs for him. Now Downs, missed time with an injury, so that could have led to the increased production there. But Downs works primarily out of the slot in 3 wide receiver sets. Pierce works as the primary number 2 receiver in wide receiver 2 wide receiver sets alongside Michael Pittman. As I talked about in the cheat sheet, if you are a subscriber, then you probably already know this, but he's played 80% of the snaps the last 3 games that he's fully played, right? He did have to leave a game with a concussion. I think that was in week 4, week 5. But he leads the team in average depth of target, 21.3 yards, average depth of target there. And I actually dug a little bit deeper into this week, but Pierce has 298 of his 317 receiving yards on the year, right? 317 receiving yards on the year. 298 of them have been on targets of 10 or more air yards, right? He leads all Indianapolis wide receivers or players, forget wide receivers, players, right? In targets of 10 or more air yards with 23. The next closest player is Michael Pittman with 15 such targets. And that's come in 2 more games because Alec Pierce has missed 2 games with that concussion. The Tennessee defense that he'll be facing this weekend, they allow the 4th highest expected points added per pass attempt on targets of 10 or more air yards. So you've got a great opportunity here for Alec Pierce to boogie on this Tennessee Titans defense. And it's a wonderful spot here for Alec Pierce. So he's a guy that I'll be, like I said, jamming in some lineups this week. Redraft, I think he's a great play. DFS, I think he's a solid play. But just given the fact that, Tennessee's probably not going to keep it uberly competitive from the other side. But, I definitely, in a redraft league, I'm going after him. I went after him pretty hard on waivers in one of my leagues where I got a bunch of injuries. I got 3 wide receivers. You got to play 3 wide receivers. and a flex, 2 running backs and a flex. So, I got no Nico Collins this week, no Garrett Wilson, so I had to go hard after Alec Pierce. But yeah, he's definitely one of my top guys this week. Anyone else in this game that I'm really excited about? I mean, it's a halfway decent matchup for Cam Ward, but he hasn't shown anything that makes us want to play him. Chimere Dike is an interesting option. Alec Manor also has a good matchup as well. Calvin Ridley, I don't think Calvin Ridley's playing this week, is he? I have no idea. I don't think so. But yeah, and if you haven't sold Tony Pollard yet, I'm sorry. I hate that for you. Anyway, let's move on to the next matchup. We've got the Green Bay Packers taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Sunday Night Football, Aaron Rodgers' revenge game as the Pittsburgh Steelers host the Green Bay Packers. Let's talk Green Bay Packer wide receiver. Romeo Doubs, he's the ECR PPR wide receiver 26. Now, Doubs has been the lead wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers over the last 3 weeks, leading them in routes, targets, receptions, and yards, and is now set to face a Pittsburgh defense, allowing the most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 matchups. Now, the Steelers have had 10 days to figure out how to stop opposing wide receivers after not being able to stop Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, which I don't know how many people can stop Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And Romeo Doubs is not Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. But Romeo Doubs is, like I said, the top target for this offense. And so when you have this matchup with this potentially high-scoring game here, just the energy around it, I think Rodgers is going to be turned up, to play this game. So Doubs, I think, interesting spot here. Excited to play him if I have him and see where we can go from there. Next up in the same game, let's talk about his teammate, who we talk about a lot, right? Feel like it's been a crazy, I want to say up and down season for Matthew Golden, but I feel like it's mostly been down, right? I guess technically at the start of the year it was headed downhill, but then we only had no way to go but up. So it's been up the last few weeks, but outside of last week, of course. But Matthew Golden, expert consensus rankings, PPR wide receiver 31. Golden has not been far behind Doubs the last 3 weeks. He's second in routes, third in targets, tied for second in receptions, and is second in yards, and now faces off against that same Pittsburgh defense in that same game, in the same environment, yada, 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 all that stuff. But I like Matthew Golden as a solid wide receiver 3 flex play, which, again, where he's about ranked. But I know people are probably looking at him being like, do I play him? Do I not? I think you can play him. People are probably wondering, because I didn't talk about the Pittsburgh tight ends at all last week, right? Like in the waiver show, I didn't talk about them because to me, it's like good luck, right? The matchup here is good. Matchup here is very good, very solid, right? It would be really funny, right? Because we saw last week, all 3 of these guys scored, right? Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, Darnell Washington, and it wasn't even National Tight End Day. National Tight End Day is this week. So could all 3 score again? I don't know, right? Weird. But for all 4 of Aaron Rodgers' touchdowns last week went to the tight end position, and they're all in a good spot this week. Green Bay allows the 3rd most PPR points to opposing tight ends. So, but DK Metcalf also in a great spot. Green Bay allows the 6th most PPR points to opposing wide receivers the last 3 weeks. So, makes you wonder. Tucker Kraft, watch it just be Tucker Kraft, right? Although Pittsburgh 16th most PPR points to allow to opposing tight ends. For whatever reason, though, Noah Fant had a good game against them last week, and I felt like they were a pretty good matchup going into last week. I don't know really what's changed. I have to go back and I'd have to look a little bit deeper at that. Maybe one of the games, one of the higher games, like scoring games that they have allowed came out of the average, which brought it down, or maybe it's just looks a little bit different compared to, relative to the rest of the league. But Tucker Kraft, I think, is always in a good spot. He's ranked as the tight end 2 according to expert consensus rankings. And I think, you kind of just always have to play Tucker Kraft at this point. All right, let's move on to the next game, Monday Night Football. Thank God we don't have a doubleheader, guys. I'm just so happy. These doubleheaders were killing me, man. Like, really killing me. Like, old man status, guys, last week after the halftime of the doubleheader of the second game, Houston, Seattle, I just went to bed. I just said, yep, clocking out, going to bed. Yeah, old man status, I know. But Washington Commanders against the Kansas City Chiefs, Monday Night Football at our regular 8:15 p.m. kickoff. And who are we playing from this game? Chiefs are 9.5-point home favorites. It seems like a Chiefs dominating game. No Jaden Daniels for the Washington Commanders. And Marcus Mariota. Give me Isaiah Pacheco, the Kansas City Chiefs. He's the expert consensus ranking running back 22. We talked about Pacheco last week, so we're going back to the well here. The last 3 weeks, he leads all Kansas City running backs in snaps, rush attempts, yards, routes. That last one, you probably didn't suspect, routes. But he's on the field a ton, right? Came through last week as the RB17 in a game where the Chiefs led pretty heavily. And this game is set up as a nice one against a Washington defense, allowing the 10th most PPR points to the position over their last 3 games. So it's another opportunity here for Pacheco to get on the board. Now, people are probably wondering, right? Brashard Smith, another guy that was featured in the cheat sheet this week. Do we play him? Are we playing Brashard Smith? I think if you're in a pinch, right? Like, I would do some weird stuff to get a win this week. And starting Brashard Smith is like the least of the weird, like one of the least weird things I would do this week to get a win. So Brashard Smith ranked as the expert consensus running back 30. Interesting. Now, Brashard Smith, while Pacheco leads all running backs in routes the last 3 weeks, Brashard Smith leads them in targets. So that's an interesting nugget to take away from that. Obviously, when the game got out of hand last week against the Raiders, we saw Brashard Smith involved as a ball carrier in the fourth quarter. And look, Kareem Hunt, I don't know if he seems like he's dealing with an injury, man. I think they called it a calf 2 weeks ago. He's sidelined with a knee injury. He didn't practice on Thursday. Look at that. Kareem Hunt did not practice Thursday. It makes me wonder, is that a veteran's rest day? What's going on there? So I would monitor that going into the weekend. But if he doesn't play, I think wheels up for Pacheco, wheels way up for Brashard Smith, because that means even more opportunities for him as well. Anybody else in this game? I'm not really excited to play anybody on the Commander side, right? I think Terry McLaurin has a chance to go. Not really excited to play him. First game off the injury, and it's on Monday. So it's like, who would you even pivot to? Chris Moore, Robbie Chosen? No. But you know who you do play? Patrick Mahomes, because he's on one. You know who you do play? Rashee Rice, because 29% target share and 4 end zone targets in his first game. Yeah, you play that guy. All right, y'all. It's time for the money time. You know what? You guys can get it. Day ones will know. That's our drop for the starts of the week because it's money time. Money time. All right, let's get it done. Let's talk about these starts of the week, starting with the quarterback start of the week. Let me go with Pittsburgh quarterback Aaron Rodgers going up against the Green Bay Packers. I'm leaning into the revenge game narrative here with Rodgers facing his former team at home on the year. Rodgers is 7th in quarterback rating when facing no pressure. He plummets to 24th when under pressure, however. Luckily, Rodgers has faced the 4th lowest pressure rate in the NFL. The Packers, on the other hand, have the 12th highest pressure rate in the NFL. And you might be wondering, John, you're not making me feel better about this. However, according to NFL Next Gen Stats, their average time to pressure the Packers is 2.72 seconds. Rodgers is 3rd in the NFL in both yards and passer rating on throws of under 2.5 seconds, with more than half of his pass attempts being under 2.5 seconds. So he's getting the ball out quick, and the Packers are getting pressure at an average time to pressure of 2.272 seconds. So we're anticipating Rodgers will beat the pressure before it gets there, and that's allowed The Packers have allowed a QB1 finish to Jacoby Brissett last week, while also allowing the third most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over their last 3 games. So it sets up nice here for Rodgers, hosting his former team at home in a revenge game. He says that he's not thinking a revenge game narrative, yada yada yada, but I don't necessarily believe him. And maybe he's not thinking of it from a revenge game perspective, but this game will mean something to him. It will mean a little bit more to him. I mean, he was making comments about this game back in August or July before he ever even signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you can't tell me this game doesn't mean a little bit extra to him. All right, let's move on to the next start of the week. We've got running back start of the week. Let's go Denver running back J.K. Dobbins going up against Dallas. Now, Dobbins hasn't had a RB1 finish all season, but he's also been extremely solid outside of a couple of games. Week 6 against the Jets is a notable one, but he hasn't scored double-digit. He scored double-digit PPR points in 5 of 7 games this season, and he's now set to face off against the Dallas defense, allowing the 6th most PPR points to opposing running backs over their last 3 games. In a week where we've got 6 teams on bye, Dobbins should get enough volume in a plus matchup to finish as an RB1 this week. All right, going with a confident start of the week here. Let's go with Chicago wide receiver Rome Odunze going up against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I'm calling my shot here with Odunze after 4 straight weeks with no less than 15 PPR points. Odunze has disappointed with back-to-back 5-point outings these last couple of weeks. He still continues, though, to lead the team in snaps, routes, and target share during that 2-week span where he's only scored, no more than 5 points. While he also had an impressive touchdown callback in week 6, right? So we tend to not remember that one because it didn't happen, but it was a play that, the intent was still to get Rome Odunze the ball in the end zone for a touchdown. It just got called back because of a penalty. Now, we enter a game here. He was facing a Ravens defense, allowing the 3rd most PPR points to opposing wide receivers over their last 3 games, which also features the highest total on the week to go along with a healthy Lamar Jackson on the other side. So this could be a prime spot here for Odunze in what could be a back and forth game. Now, to wrap this up, let's go Buffalo tight end Dalton Kincaid for the tight end start of the week, going up against the Carolina Panthers. All right, going back to the Carolina well after it flopped for us last week, RIP Mason Taylor, but Carolina allows the 2nd most EPA per pass attempt to opponents in a tight alignment and the 10th most EPA per pass attempt to opponents in a slot alignment. Kincaid works from both areas of the field there, leading all Bills players in targets, receptions, and yards when lined up in either one of those alignments. Carolina allows the 8th most PPR points to opposing tight ends over their last 3 games. And so this sets up really nice here for Kincaid, who's finished as a tight end 1 in 3 of his last 5 games. Start him up. Big time spot here for Dalton Kincaid. All right, y'all. That's a wrap. That's what it's going to do for the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. So, as I said, y'all, it's going to do it for the Week 8 matchup show. Make sure as we're entering this stretch here of the season where every win counts, every lineup decision matters, make sure you are still trusting that process, play those matchups, keep grinding. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming content, including the Sunday morning Q&A if you are a FFDX supporter tier member. We'll go over final injury updates, answer start-sit questions live before kickoff. And of course, if you haven't already, join the community over on Patreon at patreon.com/FFDX. You'll get that FFDX cheat sheet absolutely free, 100% free, drops every Tuesday. We also get articles over there, y'all. So the starts of the week comes out as an article there. We did Thursday night picks for the first time, rolled that out as an article over there. Again, those are 100% free. You don't even actually, probably shouldn't even tell you this, but you don't even need to be a Patreon member, right, to access those articles, right? Because all that information coming out on the pod, so you'll get that there for free. If you just want to see what the content looks like before you commit to even being a patron to pay nothing to get the cheat sheet, that's all your prerogative and there for you to do. Now, if you do want that extra edge, right, join the FFDX supporter tier. As I mentioned, you get the Sunday morning Q&A access. You get the weekly waiver wire article. You'll get my expanded rankings. You get, we're working on, again, more tools to provide people in that tier. And the best part about it, just $1 a month. So I appreciate y'all for tuning in. As always, good luck. We'll get this. Have a good one. Peace.